announcing, oh, it's a done deal. The PR arm of the ruling class, the media, cable news, print media, oh, it's a done deal. We averted a disaster, a catastrophe. There's a lot of reasons they do this. Not every UPS worker is part of Worker Strike Back or a socialist alternative or watches a stream like this. So it also is to, I don't know if it's consciously or subconsciously, it almost coerces the regular rank and file members to go, well, it must be a done deal. So, I might as well vote for this. You get what I'm saying? It's to do that. And it's also to get the community or the people or the masses of people that they're propagandizing to get them on board with the corporations. It's like, well, if you don't want this rate, if you don't want this 20, whatever the percentage is, 25% raise and this and this and this, then what do you want? Like, what else do you want? It's to serve many purposes, and those are just a couple of them that it serves. Now, I would like to go to Kshama and let's pivot to talking more detail about what's happening with UPS. I see you and Worker Strike Back have really been going pretty hard at this. So if you could just kind of get, for anyone that don't know anything about sort of what's happening, you can just kind of give us an overview of how did we get here? How did UPS get here with this strike, and why should we be voting no on this contract?
Yeah, thanks so much, CJ and Jay. I want to echo Steve's thank yous to you for covering this in such detail, because this is very, very important. I hope everybody all working people who are listening to this, especially if you are a UPS Teamster, I would really, as a rank and file member of the teachers union myself, I will urge you, and I'm sure Steve will join me in urging you, that you read the contract carefully and join us tomorrow at the Zoom meeting that Worker Strike Back is going to be doing at 3 p.m. Pacific. And this article that you all have on the screen, that is, Steve Capri is one of the co-authors, and these are all rank and file Teamsters, rank and file activists with Worker Strike Back. And one starting point that I wanted to have, and I'm sure it'll be very useful to hear from Steve personally about what are the actual things missing. I'll give some of the overview, and then maybe if it's okay, we can hand it to him. But the starting point is all the struggles, the day-to-day suffering that UPS workers, both the drivers and the inside workers, such as the loaders, are going through with having to combat deadly heat, all the other problems, not to mention the nonstop work that they're doing. Why is all this even necessary? Look at the profits that the bosses are making. The corporation made profits of $13 billion last year. I mentioned this on your show 2 days ago, and that was on top of handing $10 billion over to the stockholders. So these are literally the billionaire class. It's not some mythical beings. These are actual people who skim off all the labor that the workers are doing. And so for UPS to say, we can't give anything more, it is such a lie, because they can. It's that they won't give. And so, in other words, this again and again, all of these circumstances point towards building a class battle. Class warfare is the logic of capitalism. We didn't create the class war. Workers didn't create the class war. Workers are forced to fight back, because if we don't fight back, then even in the best of circumstances, where the Hoffa leadership, the old corrupt Hoffa leadership of the Teamsters, was driven out by the courageous rank and file actions, including the strike actions and so on in the earlier years. And there is a lot of pressure on the current administration of Sean O'Brien and Fred Zuckerman. But even in those circumstances, we can see how, unless the leadership is willing to activate the rank and file, this is the almost 350,000 workers, unless these rank and file workers are activated into a fighting and extremely well-prepared strike action, even in the best of circumstances, the contract is not going to be what the workers need, and certainly what they deserve. And so that's what we are talking about. And so I hope, Steve, you can talk about the specific things that are missing. One of the things is the question of whether or not the 10,000 full-time jobs that UPS has been promising, will they be created? What about the weekend? I mean, they keep fudging on this question of whether the workers will actually have the right to the weekend, or will they be forced in some shape or form, based on some sort of small print in the contract, be forced to do mandatory weekend overtime. All of those questions, I think, are important for us to discuss. And also, the most overarching point is that while claiming to have defeated the two-tier system that existed, is the leadership accepting another two-tier system that is again in the small print? So what are the poison pills in this contract? I think we have to look at that very carefully.
And Steve, let's bring you in for the to fill in those details of like what is being asked, what's not being met. One of the things that I hear those that want to on the side of the corporation, oh, they got air conditioning in their trucks now, and I'm like, no, that's just for new trucks. You know how many old trucks they have? They're gonna still have on the road. So that's one of the things I heard, but can you speak to any of what Kshama is speaking to as far as the details of the contract or negotiations, or your thinking on either any of that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Just to frame it, starting where Shama was before I start to list some of the specific deficiencies. Most of the public, in my experience, has been told, like we were saying, that this fight is over and we've won a historic contract, and we really need to raise that this struggle is ongoing. And and I think the key point is the tentative agreement is better when it's compared with the awful concessionary contracts that we've seen for decades that came out of the Hoffa leadership. Also, when we've seen the awful concessionary contracts that the labor movement in general has been forced to take for a very long time. When we compare it to those situations, we might say, "Oh, this looks better than what we've seen." But being better than those bad contracts, right, is not the bar we should be setting. First of all, the bar should be that we have the capacity and the circumstances right now for a truly historic contract, a truly historic one that can be, like I said before, a beacon for the auto workers, the Amazon, Starbucks, and the whole labor movement and the whole working class. And the bar should also be that this decades of old Teamster leadership giving up concessions to UPS, dressed up in kind of the guise of the company being too broke or needing to expand their operations, which was always bullshit. So in part, we're playing catch up to get back decades of giveaways to the bosses. But also, look at this, in 2019, before the pandemic, UPS was making around $4 billion in profits, which was growing steadily up to that point. But then over 2020, 2021, 2022, the pandemic, right? We see all-time record profits. In 2022, like Kshama mentioned, $13 billion. That's quadruple just in profits. Forgetting for a moment those massive stock buybacks. Quadruple the profits going to these shareholders. And so where is the quadrupling or the doubling or the tripling of wages at UPS, of working conditions? And like, again, Kshama said, the workers who earned all that, created all that value, that went into the pockets of this handful of very wealthy people who have never had to work a day in most of their lives, certainly didn't earn that money or create that wealth. It's got to be about what we can win with the strongest organized no vote, and if need be, with a strike. And so getting to the specifics, starting with some economic issues, we need raises these raises at every level basically do not keep up with inflation or catch up to how much we've lost. And so, particularly over the last year or so, inflation and these new wages are kind of like a cost of living adjustment, right? They're just getting us back kind of the same buying power that we had, maybe a little less than we had before. Whereas the actual cost of living adjustments in the contract are only for the top rate workers, which means the folks that need it the least, and uses this like really weak formula that does not pay a serious like price index, like cost of living based adjustment. And so the question, is about how much buying power we have, not the number of dollars. That's not relevant. And then the question, for ourselves and our families to have food, housing, education, but also a good standard of living, be able to square away some savings, buy a house, pursue our dreams, right? Like these are the things that a good, quote unquote, a good job in capitalism is quote unquote supposed to provide, right? And so, yeah, I think no worker should be making less than $25. Yes, right off the bat, on the previous panel mentioning that the minimum wage should be 42 in the U.S. and like workers strike back, and also Amazon workers at the KC Vici hub are calling for $30. I don't think that should be out of the question for the base minimum for UPS workers. We also need things that current TA doesn't have, like these market rate adjustments, which are like pay bumps that UPS gives to get people in the door and pulls away once they're like kind of in and think that they're we need to make it permanent, and also equal across different facilities in each local, so it's fair. And we need inflation adjustments for pension benefits. Pensions are completely untouched, more or less, in this contract. We need, as Kshama mentioned, 10,000 new full-time jobs made available to part-timers, because there's a lot of part-timers who want full-time jobs and just cannot make the progression happen because of seniority in their hub and things. And a huge one, this is one that was brought up, right? Air conditioning. We are not talking about any retrofitting of the 100,000 trucks in the fleet currently. No retrofitting. And by the end of the contract, that means in 5 years, the contract says they'll have 28% of the 100,000 will be new trucks that have got air conditioning in them, which is nothing. And I think it's worth noting that there's no guarantee beyond that the rest of the trucks will continue to get it. So we can't even say this is a legacy win that we will eventually reap the benefits of. There's no guarantees at all in that regard. So very last one, I'll stop on this, is Sundays. Like Sean started to mention, there's now language in the contract that did not exist before that makes it clear that and things that Sean O'Brien has said publicly, even before the contract, the TA came out, indicate that they are open to UPS doing Sundays, having us all work Sundays. And, the labor movement, one of the biggest victories that we all know about the labor movement, in addition to the 8-hour workday, which we don't have at UPS, or many other things, was the weekend. And we've already given up Saturdays because it was, just the way it has to be, the way the business has to be. And now we're about to give up Sundays. Again, the largest private sector union in the country, the strongest bargaining unit in the U.S., and we're going to give away Sundays rather than take back Saturdays, which would be the direction we should be going in. And if the industry needs that to survive, which it absolutely doesn't, then the workers need to lead the way on how to do that rather than the bosses making the decision.
Absolutely. And I was going to bring in Carl just to answer the same question, JB, then we'll go to you. But Carl, I wanted to add a little bit different perspective. You're outside looking in, not necessarily on the ground, like Steve or Kshama, because you're in another country. But how do you view the situation that's happening with UPS, with the Teamsters and the rank and file and corporations, and then could you sort of correlate that to more broadly how this is the plan internationally? This is the plan for the world. This is the plan of the ruling powers all over the world. So could you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, I what I want to say is about time, right? It's about time that workers demands what's due to them. Right now in U.S., they especially since start from late 70s. This is when the U.S. corporations started to offsource manufacturing jobs overseas. And this is when the U.S. the capitalists, it's not even U.S. capitalists anymore. It's like global capitalist class. They go where they can squeeze the most out of the labor, so they can get more profit. And but UPS, this is the service job. This is one of those few jobs that they cannot have effectively outsourced yet. So what they do instead is they still try to do the same thing they do everywhere, which is squeeze the wage of their workers, so they get more trickle up economics. And this is ludicrous. And I think it's very important too that the U.S. workers are fighting for their rights domestically, because right now the U.S. government, they have a full reign, basically, to spend money on the military-industrial complex to wage war all across the world. They need to be reminded there's some serious issues that needs to be dealt with domestically, right? Right now we are being, told about our mainstream media to care about Ukraine or care about Taiwan. It's like, no, no, no. You need to care about United States. How about care about what's happening inside US? Care about your workers. So it's very encouraging to see that the workers themselves speak up for their own rights, fight for their own rights, and we need to, the ruling class, the elite, they shouldn't have a free reign to do whatever they want all across the world, just because we allow them to. We should not allow them to do that, right? And by fighting for the workers' rights in U.S. actually helps to put a crimp on the U.S. imperialism abroad. That's my take.
Go ahead, JB.
So I want to just comment on the whole AC thing, because this, when you said that by 5 years, they're only going to have 25% of their vehicles installed with AC, that to me is wild. I'll be honest with you. If I was part of the Teamsters union, I would make it, if they're not willing to put AC in 100% of the vehicles within 6 months, then I would make it demand. I said any worker that's in a non-AC vehicle should demand a 100% hazard pay rate hike to make them for putting their workers in harm's way. I think that's only fair. So if you're going to put me in harm's way, you have to pay me double. So if you're paying me $25 an hour, then you pay me $50 an hour to work in a vehicle that does not have AC, because I refuse to put myself in harm's way without being compensated for it. I think that that's only fair. As somebody, if I was in that situation personally, and the thing is that would have to get a fire on their ass and force them to have to put AC in the vehicles just so that people can work in a more safer condition. My thing is like, I think there was a video that was shown earlier in the summit today that was talking about how they didn't want OSHA. They didn't want anybody, even OSHA, to know about how drivers are being treated, which is, to me, completely asinine.